Councilmember Breckus?
Here.
Dewar?
Here.
Ward 3 is vacant at this time. Weber? Here. Taylor?
Here.
Reese?
Here.
Sheevy?
Here.
Madam Mayor, you do have a quorum of the Reno City Council.
Okay, I'm going to send it right back to you for item A3, public comment.
Thank you. All right, our first item today, is public comment. It should be noticed for those in the audience that comments are to be addressed to the mayor and council as a whole. Comments heard under this item will be limited to 3 minutes per person and may pertain to matters both on and off the council's agenda. Please note that the council may not take action upon any matter not agendized on today's agenda. When you're called on for public comment, please state your name for the record and begin speaking. The timer will begin when you say your name, and you will be afforded 3 minutes. If you're an attendee in the Zoom meeting and would like to make public comment, please raise your hand at this time. Lastly, while in this room, please be respectful. Warnings will be issued by the presiding officer if there's disruptive behavior, and you will be asked to leave chambers if the behavior continues. Our first public commenter today is Nicole Anajapesis, followed by Tom Dunn, followed by William Mantle.
All right. Hello, Nicole.
I have come today to speak about what we consider the standards of democracy to be here in this city. I'm a co-founder in a mutual aid project that operates here in Reno. And when I say that we have seen firsthand the direct displacement and aggressive gentrification that out-of-touch political deals have done to those living beneath the breadline, I cannot stress enough how democracy, as we call it here, has failed. I live in Ward 3, and though I do not have data in front of me, I can speak from personal experience and the anecdotes of my friends and neighbors that this area has seen violent price hikes and cost of living, housing insecurity, and general downturn in well-being for anybody that punches a clock or turns a wrench. Myself and people in similar situations are often one bad day at work, one broken arm, one busted transmission, or one loose tooth away from becoming displaced as well. It is difficult to dream up a scenario where a mayor and a city council that is so disillusioned they believe the city wants an NFT of a broken glass whale rather than contingency plans for the housing crisis would ever be responsible enough to appoint somebody who can see and appropriately represent our needs. So many people that we see every Tuesday are out there because of deals that this city has made that saw their lives as less valuable than an entertainment district or an empty lot. I do not believe that we have an operational democracy here, and faith in what the West considers democracy has faltered on both sides of the political divide. Anyone with any true understanding of politics here will tell you that there is no real difference between the right or the left in this country. And I've had many stern talkings too from my more liberal friends that on a federal level this is true, but it is so important to get involved with local elections, vote, have a voice, etc. I've yet to see it, but here I am. When our rights and our livelihoods get stripped away from us, someone somewhere is always shouting, well, you should have voted, you should have showed up to city council meetings, you should have used your voice or signed a petition, but this system will always point dirty fingers at the victims of its assault. With 2 city council members resigning in the last 2 months and the appointment of one new yes-man talking head type who has expressed support for unchecked senseless development and who lost their bid for city council last time they ran, and a council that is clearly lacking in overall diversity, it is hard to believe that the needs of the poor and the working class will be appropriately recognized by appointed representatives. Also, as an appointed representative, council member for Ward 5 should not have any rights to take place in the upcoming appointment process. This whole scene resides in a territory of oligarchy. The community asked for a special election last time to be held, and you, the powerful minority, appointed someone despite that ask. I would like to be proven wrong, and I would like to see you listen to the community and hold a special election to fill this new seat. But I know what you will do, and I think we all know what you will do. So once again, I say to the community, we urgently need to realize that we have been sold an idea to hide the ugly reality that we live in a brutally violent system ruled by an even more ruthless minority, and that all pretense that we are free is a beautifully woven marketing scam of the highest order. Most importantly, urgently, we have to remember and realize that all of these ideas, all of these constructs, all of these laws are man-made and thus can easily be undone and remade to work for us. Not just the majority, not just the minority, but for everyone. It just takes democracy to do so. For those people that make the rules, there are no rules, and I implore all of you to prove me wrong.
Tom Dunn, followed by Will Mantle.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor, members of council, Mr. Thornley. For the record, Tom Dunn, representing the men and women of the Reno Firefighters Association. I'm here today to publicly thank Councilman Delgado for his dedication and his service to our community. He is a child of this community. He is growing his family in this community as well, and he will be sadly missed by the firefighters of this community, where we have built a relationship with them, addressed our needs of our community over the last 10 years that he's been here. So thank you.
Will Mantle.
Good afternoon, Council. I just came here to implore you that if at all possible, I think a special election is more due and proper and democratic than an appointment, and I would urge you to do that. I understand that your hands are tied, that you have 30 days to fill the seat, either through appointment or by declaring a special election. And it would be great if there was some more, perhaps, wiggle room within our charter that allowed an individual to, say, temporarily fill until an election could be had. And I don't know if that's something that you guys have considered changing or altering within the charter, but I think that would appease a lot of people. That does create a problem for the appointee potentially with the way term limits work here in Nevada. I'm not quite certain on that because we don't have an answer, but I think that is something that somebody could step up. They could fill the seat to get the representation, at least for some time for Ward 3 in this instance, until a special election could be held. That person then could run in that special election if they so choose, or perhaps they just say, thanks, that was a good time and I'm out. So I just implore you that if you can have a special election, I know you can't do both right now, from what I understand with the charter, but something to look at. I haven't seen anyone talk about that or consider it or check for that revision, and I thought maybe you guys could do that. Thank you.
Thanks, William.
All right, Madam Mayor, with that, we have no additional public comment. We have no hands raised in the Zoom meeting, and additionally, we have not received any correspondence.
And William, we've talked about it. You're spot on.
So at this time, we will be closing general public comment and moving on to A4, approval of the agenda.
All right, thank you, Madam Clerk. May I get a motion? I have a motion, I have a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you. Moving on to item B1, which is our item for discussion today. Give me just a second. We do have one public commenter for item B1, which is John Killoran.
Right.
Madam Mayor, council members, my name for the record is John Killoran, longtime Reno resident and the last 25 years in the same home in Ward 3 in Donner Springs. First and foremost, and I want to pick up on the theme from yesterday's city council meeting, it would be remiss if I didn't give the same appreciation and adulation to Councilman Delgado that he received yesterday. Well deserved. He served with passion, he served with creativity, a decade of service that I think mostly was served with great humanity. He brought great inclusivity, which in Ward 3 is the way it should be, from the Northeast Reno neighborhoods to DeMonte Ranch and every place in between in the ward, including my beloved Donner Springs. He served with great grace, and his legacy will last long, and whomever fills his position should try to maintain those great measures and efforts on inclusivity, especially for those who are underserved or feel they don't have a word, or for folks like Nicole who feel that they're not being heard. I also want to commend the council, and I know that it is difficult at times to make such decisions, but the Reno City Charter is what it is, as are Nevada revised statutes. And there were measures in place, and I think that the council acted in a timely, prudent, practical, and thoughtful fashion in filling the Ward 5 vacancy, including fiscal responsibility. Special elections don't just pay for themselves, taxpayers do. Councilmember Taylor, I wish you nothing but the best of success in serving your ward, as well as the rest of the city and community. I've been very fortunate to have a wonderful work life in which passion came first and paycheck came second. A 22-year broadcast career, and also the last 15 promoting our region and the area for great sports and recreation opportunities up to and including an Olympic Winter Games bid. I did so on a local, regional, national, and international level, trying to promote the city that I love so much. I've also had a great opportunity to work in wonderful nonprofits, such as the Nevada Humane Society, as well as CareChest, which provides medical equipment, free prescriptions to those underserved and uninsured, which are some of the most problematic situations in the healthcare system in our city. But what I'm most proud of is that I am a third-generation Reno resident. I followed and lived most of my adult life here after my grandparents and 2 uncles had moved here. But even more proud that I raised and helped raise a beautiful daughter who is the first Reno native in the family, and now blessing us with her husband with the 5th generation here in Northern Nevada. But ours is just one family story. There are so many stories of families throughout the area and in Ward 3 and diverse families of all types, and they all need to be heard. I felt a call to service as well as my reminiscing on Councilman Delgado's service. And that's why I do intend, whatever the process will be, to put my name forth to serve the great people of Ward 3 and the city of Reno, and hopefully work with you, Madam Mayor, and the council as a new representative in Ward 3. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Good morning, good afternoon. Mickey Huntsman, City Clerk for the record. Glad to be back here, sort of, but not really. All right, coolio, here we go. Ready? First thing on the agenda today is item B1, which is the discussion and direction from you all on whether we are going to proceed with a method and a timeline to fill the Ward 3 vacancy, which has been vacated by Councilmember Delgado, effective tomorrow. And this is a similar process. We just went through it, unfortunately. So I will go into a bit of detail, but mostly I'm just going to kind of highlight the dates in the process. I do have Jamie Rodriguez, the Washoe County Registrar of Voters, here with me today if there's additional questions or we have needs from our counterparts. So the way that this works is in accordance with NRS, we are required to proceed 2 ways. Either a special election, which would require a vote for a resolution to be passed within the next 30 days, setting a timeline and an expectation for a special election process to be stood up and conducted, and or an appointment process, which is similar to what we just went through last month for Councilmember Neil Majardin's seat. And if we proceed in that direction, we are required by law within a 30-day time frame to make that appointment process happen. So I will take any questions.
All right, thank you so much, Madam Clerk. I love the t-shirt, I really do. It's great. All right. Any questions, comments from the board? No? Go ahead.
Okay, well,
Go ahead, Councilwoman Durr.
all right. I guess the floor is open for us to decide now. Okay, so I'll just say a few words, and they're reminiscent of some of the things I've said last time. And I'm so glad to see Jamie Rodriguez here because I think it will be a big help, and thank you for coming. I believe, as I think we all do up here on the council, that the foundation of democracy rests on elected representation. And we've all been through elections at this point, almost. And we have an appointee as well. And I said it last month, and I wanted to say it again today, that I'm interested in the best way to get there. I think Mr. Mantle made a really good and on-point statement when he spoke about the hybrid concept of appointing someone and then following through with an election. And I discussed that idea with people after last meeting, and I thought it was some kind of genius. I thought it was a really good idea. I did some further research. It sounds like our charter's not laid out that way to do that. But I do want to make a commitment that, going forward, I would like to see if we can amend our charter so that would be a possibility. It doesn't mean that means that it would still be a decision for whoever's on council if such a situation occurred again, but at least we'd have more options. And last time, one of the things I was most passionate about, and I think you know this too, was that it seemed perfectly timed to be able to do an election for the ward at the same time that the general election was being held. People are out, we'd have great turnout, equipment's in place, locations are selected and staffed. That's why I was particularly passionate last time, because I thought it would work perfectly. What I didn't know, and maybe Jamie can tell us more about it, is that it sounded like the ballot had been set at some date prior. And I kept thinking, well, is there a way to have a parallel process where we do our regular ballot and we have a separate for those in Ward 5 in that case, and in this case, Ward 3, do it in parallel. And it seemed perfectly timed to do that. And if that ever happened again, I would love to be able to do something like that. I don't know how we would get there, but I just think it was as aligned as it could be. This time, we're off schedule. I mean, now we're coming up on an election, and there's no time to do something in parallel, even if we had the authority today through our charter to do it. So what I'm interested in here today is just, if we did do an election, what would it look like? What would the timeframes be like? And lay it out for us, if you would, if that's okay, Madam Mayor.
Yeah, that's completely fine, absolutely.
Okay.
The one thing I do want to point out, and I pointed this out last time, and of course, all of us up here believe in elections. I mean, we wouldn't have ran if we didn't. And it's tough, they're hard, and anyone that does run, I have a great amount of respect for, absolutely. Just to put your name in there, you sort of become under a spotlight and scrutiny and all the things that go along with that. So I have tremendous respect for whoever decides to run. So I'm gonna say everyone up here absolutely believes in that, because it's a lot of hard work, and you wouldn't do it unless you truly had the passion to do it and believed in elections, right? The other thing I wanna point out, we are also damned if you do, damned if you don't. Because today some people will walk away satisfied and others will walk away unhappy. And so I want everyone to know that is always a tough position to be in. The other thing is, there is a lot of work to get done, and there's a lot of important issues. You heard Nicole speak about it. Affordable housing, and so many people are going without. We're making a lot of big decisions. We just spent, I think, what was it, 25 million on our ARPA for housing and great programs and things like that. Those things need to get done. Those are important. Those are for people that can't wait. And honestly, during the process, I actually think the day can't remember if we were interviewing or what had happened, but Oscar couldn't be here, and then we had a council member out, and we couldn't do any business at all. And that does concern me, that when you don't have someone sitting here, then you don't get anything done. And that's what happened that day. And I think we had to wait 4 or 5 hours to get back to the dais to get something done. So when a council member doesn't show up, it's actually really hard on the body, but it's even harder on the residents that live here. So those are always, tough and concerning. But again, I want to say, listen, wholeheartedly, this council believes in full, fair elections, 100%. So, I sympathize with everyone that feels that way, and I think you make great points, and absolutely, Mr. Mantle, love to have you on the Charter Committee. I think you would do a phenomenal job, and it does need to change. And I think maybe why it hasn't is, none of us knew we were going to be in any of these positions, and that is a fact. We had no idea that Councilwoman Jardin would leave, or Councilman Delgado. It's a surprise to all of us as, someone exits. So that's probably why it was never pushed. It's, rare. It happens, but it is rare. But this is a different circumstance for sure. So anyway, okay. Madam Clerk, I'm going to send it back to you. You can kind of give us an idea of what a special election would look like, timeframes, timelines, all that
Okay.
good stuff. Thanks.
So if the question specifically was, if we decided to move forward with a special election, what are the timeframes and timelines that we're looking at? Okay, so
Something that we would do at the city? Is that a county function? I mean, who does it? When would it be done? All of that.
absolutely. So we are required to adopt a resolution within 30 days. So regardless of at least that sets the initial timeline. So the initial resolution would set our timelines, the expectations and how we would conduct the special election. So that would need to be adopted within 30 days. We tentatively have it proposed for adoption on our first meeting in October, which is October 12th. And then at that point, once that is established, we would that would establish, the timelines and the budgetary funding source for the special election. The timeline really from our Ward 5 discussion hasn't changed, so we wouldn't be able to stand up any sort of special election until after the 2022 general election is closed in November. So the soonest we would start to work on a process with the Washoe County Registrar of Voters would be in December of 22, and really, as we discussed last time, and I'm happy to have Jamie up to be more specific on dates and timelines, but they do have an audit and an appeal process timeline that they have to work within, so they have a set standard of parameters. So really, we aren't even capable of working through a process until the end of December. Now, we can stand up our own special election. That's obviously, that is an option for us. However, in discussion with the Washoe County Registrar of Voters, the real issue that we're facing right now is the use of voting machines. Those are currently being programmed and utilized for the general upcoming election. And because of that, we would be hard pressed to be able to find those machines to be able to conduct our own special election prior to the November general election date. So we're still looking at a December start date, accepting candidate filings in January, and then standing up a special election tentatively in February or March.
Could I ask a follow-up question to that, or Ms. Rodriguez?
Sorry, I'm just going to kind of jump in and clarify a little bit for the timeline. I think you're probably looking more at March for the actual election, because if you're doing candidate filing in January, you need to remember that you still have to follow the election law. So you have to allow for a challenge period. You still have to allow for time for all of the materials to be printed, machines to be programmed, poll worker training to occur, materials to go out to the voters, all of those types of things would still have to occur. So March would likely be the absolute earliest, would be sometime in March.
When it could be held.
Correct.
And then, so the people could run, I guess, January, February, because you're saying voting would be in March.
Probably later in March, so they would
Even to April.
Correct, yeah, depending,
Okay.
Right, and I think it's really up to this council to determine some of those dates. Again, as we said last time, there's nothing my office can do until we complete the general election, which will likely be mid to late December, based on all of the timelines for this election. And so while you guys can start candidate filing, somewhere in there to early January, for us to begin the process of building ballots and elections and all of those types of things, and working with the vendors, realistically, we're looking at, that January time period. And then again, you still have to allow for that time period for them to actually make the materials and the programming of the machines. All of that would still have to occur. So that does take, easily a month, if not a little more than that.
And then I had a follow-up, and then I'll yield and then come around. I'm sure there's more questions, but the question was for you, I'm sorry, Mickey, was just, you said city or the county. So do we have the infrastructure or the personnel or the knowledge to do it here?
No.
And what would it take for that?
A lot of time with Jamie.
Okay.
Historically, we discussed this briefly last time. The city of Reno hasn't conducted a special election in over 30 years, and so it would be a brand new process to us. We don't have documentation, we don't have records, we don't have any of the infrastructure established at this point to be able to just turn around, turn a key, and start the process. So it's not something that, after the last appointment, we did have a discussion. I had a discussion with several of you of looking into that process and being prepared for the next time. I did not anticipate it would be 30 days later, but having the resources available to us so that if and when this does happen again, we are more readily prepared to be able to pull this off or stand it up and be able to produce it. And the timing really is the construct of what we are up against today, is that we're in the middle of an election cycle, we're getting ready to conduct an election, and that is the prohibitor of why we are not capable of just turning around and starting a process with Jamie tomorrow.
Thank you so much. Just really quickly, I'm sort of curious. Do you think in the future, maybe this might be something that could change over in your office to where you could have sort of a better streamline of special elections?
So, you know, I don't know that it's a streamline issue. Honestly, I think it's a timing issue.
Okay.
Primaries might have been a little bit easier, but I don't want to overpromise anything, right? General elections, I have almost 20 more sites than I had for the primary, so I just don't have the equipment. And it's really a best practices that you don't want two elections happening in the same space. It's really just far too simple that ballots get crossed, and instead of using, I have 5 tabulators, right? To kind of break it down to the most elementary, I have 5 tabulators to run ballots through to be counted. So if I was running, tabulators 1 through 4 for the general election and tabulator 5 for the special election, it would be far too easy for staff to grab the wrong bin and run the wrong ballots through the wrong tabulator and cause an issue with the tabulation of results for the election and us getting errors, right, and causing those types of problems. So to the question last time, right, of why can't you just kind of start it while you're wrapping up the last one?
Yeah.
Best practices is that you don't want 2 elections happening at the same time because you can run into those types of cross-contaminations. So you want one election to be completed, packed up, all of those materials removed before you ever start a second election. And so it really, unfortunately, at this point in time is more of a timing issue than it is a streamline. So running 2 elections at one time is just really a best practices issue, as well as just having the amount of equipment available to be able to do it.
Okay, thank you so much. Councilman Breckus?
Does the legislature allow for all mail-in ballots?
It does not. There's really 2 reasons. One, there's an ADA compliance piece of it. So you have to allow for machines for ADA compliance for people. Also, while we do have an all mail-in election system in the state of Nevada now, we do also have the ability for voters to opt out. So if voters opt out, you cannot mail them a mail-in ballot. So we do not have the option for an all mail-in.
So you talked about this, time delay in getting your poll workers, training them for this special election, which only covers 1/5 of the city's geography. I don't know what that is countywide. It's probably, in the area of 1/10 of the county. So have you done any analysis of, within that, how many sites you would need or feel comfortable could have to make it as streamlined as possible? In my mind, it would be something along the lines of, obviously, you'd be stood up at your county headquarters, which I think are in Ward 3. Is the county complex in Ward 3?
So I want to be very clear that if the county were to run a special election for the city of Reno, it would be through an interlocal. So a lot of those decisions would actually be made by this
Okay.
council,
Okay.
not by us.
Okay, so I'd make some decisions along the lines of, because I think mail-in and drop-off is the trend, of, 2 sites in the ward, one being, even if it's not within your ward, within Ward 3, it's pretty much on the line, and then another site. And I think we could get there. I really think we can get there. I think that I understand all the complexity you have, especially as you're looking at a general election, but I just don't see you drilling down into, or us being teed up to have the discussion of what a ward-specific special election would look like. And in my analysis of, the ease with which the legislature had tried to create, universal voter ballot access, whether or not people choose to exercise that, that's the candidate's job to get those people, encourage them to vote, that it's worthwhile. But, your complex, one other site, universal mail-in drop-off, I don't see a problem with that. I actually think this is a body that wants to move forward in time, be tech savvy, move into the new age. I think we do it. I think we think about how to do that. And I also think that is, if it's 30 days from today, or from Mr. Delgado's resignation, which is tomorrow, correct? So we have to fill, while 3 members of the body have votes flying for or against them at the same time. They're on the ballot, as they're also going through kind of a political process of deciding who they're going to vote for, with one person who could make the difference, no one's voted for except for this table. I'm really concerned about that. Incumbents win 85% of the time. I think it's going to be very hard for one of these people to not be around and serve with the person they want to appoint, but I don't think it's good optics at all. I think it's very poor, and I think we need to make some good decisions about how to lean forward in this electoral process. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, Councilman Reese, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Ms. Rodriguez, I'm going to sort of start at the beginning. First of all, it's the first time I've had you in chambers, and it's very welcome to have you. I understand that you are new to your position, but you have demonstrated some grace and skill in the position that matters to me. So thank you for your service. It's difficult work to do. We live in a very hyper-partisan time where everything is very scrutinized and every decision is second-guessed. And so I want you to understand that from my perspective, first and foremost, I thank you for the work that you do. You can sense that this body has some basic consternation because, of course, as Madam Mayor said eloquently and correctly, we do have an express preference as a society for democratically held elections. Of course, I have said before and I'll say again, there is an element of this which of course is very democratic. Appointments happen at all levels of government. We have appointed members of the school board. Our lieutenant governor was appointed by the governor himself. Our state election law provides for special appointments and special elections. And so the idea that somehow it's less democratic, I think is anathema to me. It's one of the processes and policies of democracies to fill vacancies in a certain way. It's not to say that we cannot do something different, but that it's anti-democratic. I bristle at that thought. So you've laid out a couple of different things, and I want to make sure I've gotten some sort of thoughts out. First of all, when you hear us talking about special election, you're talking about sort of what I would call classically a jungle primary, meaning all candidates, if there are 13 candidates, they come, they run all on the same ballot, right? You're not talking about us holding a primary into a general, or are you? Can we clarify that?
So the cost that we provided was for one election. So if you were going to hold two, if you're going to do a primary and then a general type narrowing, it would be double the cost because it's obviously double the materials, because those were the estimates that we gave you were based on materials.
Okay, and let me ask Ms. Rodriguez, because I don't know your background as thoroughly as I might like to otherwise. I take it you have run elections before?
I did run the 2022 primary for Washington County.
And so I want to understand, when municipal elections are held in odd years, what is the turnout like for those elections?
So we have not done those in Washoe County in many, many, many decades. If you do look down south, they're usually less than 10% for the time period by which they used to do those.
Yeah, so the city of Henderson and the city of Las Vegas used to do them in odd years, and now legislatively that was corrected. And the reason why was because there was almost no turnout. 10% might be being gracious. So my fear is that if this council were to embark on just a trial run at trying to stand up our own elections, that we'd have both a primary and a general condensed into one election. So you have 13 candidates, let's just say, and each one of those candidates goes out, and in a universe where there are 10% of the ward voting, they could win an election by having 1 or 2% of the vote, right? If every candidate got 2% and someone squeezed out 3%, then we would have someone on this body who got 3% of a low voter turnout primary in this body. And that to me is the reason why I do not believe that that is a Democratic priority. And in fact, I think the Nevada Independent ran an article this week, which I have shared with my colleagues on the dais, which analyzes the data for the last several times that off-season elections have occurred. And it's troubling because I think it would force candidates to run not only in a really condensed time period. You're telling me that people who are candidating for the Ward 3 vacancy would go out and knock on doors in January and February to run in a March election. This is not going to happen. I have run in several elections. January and February are particularly difficult for candidates to knock on door. It's cold, it's dangerous, it's dark. people are not home and people are not interested in having you on the door. So your ability to engage is almost non-existent. So again, I thank you for your time, and I have gone over by about a minute, and so I want to be cognizant of my colleagues' time. I do have some other sort of what I'll call technical things about when they run, how would you do a trial run, all those things, but I might save that for the second time.
The other thing that I think is disappointing, I'm not a believer in ward-only voting. I believe that the entire city should be participating in that process, and then it really gets even much more narrow. I mean, I remember whenever it was the entire city, I could get my entire body at groundbreakings. Now I'm lucky if I get one. It depends on what ward I'm in. I've a couple of colleagues that show up every time, but it's would be nice to have the entire body, and also rooting for the entire city, rooting for Reno, and not just in one specific, area, which I think is always challenging. But that would be another thing, is that it's just one of those things that I have heartburn over. I don't think we're big enough to where we look differently. I think we all have to be engaging in the entire process and in the city. So that's just one of my soapboxes. Councilwoman Dewar.
Yeah, thank you. Oh, you didn't go. Go ahead.
Oh, you got to get your sanitizer up there.
Sorry.
We're so fancy
I thought
here.
we were still
Our system is not
on the
working.
first
Sorry.
round. Sorry about that.
Go ahead, Councilwoman Weber.
Well, you just made a comment, and as you know, I'm going to disagree with you because I have before shared with you, because I believe in government closest to the people. And so I like the representation. I mean, that's just my personal belief. I just believe that the government closest to the people. And so therefore, I believe the wards, and I am one that would like to be at more events throughout the city, and I know, but I can't, because I'm doing the work that I'm supposed to be doing as well in my community. So I just wanted to share that. There's just another side, and I know we've had that conversation before, so.
I just think everyone should be participating, and also when you take a vote, it means a lot, and that you care about how you're voting, whether that's in your ward or not. And sometimes we see where I feel like it doesn't matter to a certain ward because it's not in their ward, and I don't think that that's the way it should be. That's just my personal preference. Okay, go ahead, Councilmember Taylor, go ahead. I'm trying to be more formal here.
You.
Well, no, I didn't want to call you by first name.
Thank you so much for being
I
here.
got in trouble for that before.
And thank you for your knowledge and sharing it with us. My question is actually for Mr. Manager about representation. So do you think, in your best opinion, that there are going to be things that come before council between now and March or April when we might be able to get somebody up here that are going to impact Ward 3?
I think, particularly after the first of the year, that's when we really start to hit our stride in the budget workup, and there are a number of meetings and decisions that need to be made that I think it's important that all of the wards be represented.
Okay, so I think that if we had somebody here before February, March, April, then Ward 3 would be fairly represented in those decisions. Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councilwoman Breckus.
Yeah, I didn't get to say this last time because the meeting was held when I had a doctor's appointment. I had to run off. But, I thought the last one and this one was a great time to hold an election because we know voters are engaged right now. We know people are out there on doors and people are opening doors and having conversations. And how awesome for these Ward 3 wannabes to be out here for the next 5 weeks hitting doors with everyone else saying, it ain't my time now on this ballot, but it's coming. Where would you be with me? Be with me, come to my event, be with me. It's great campaigning time. As for the discussion of, no one campaigns in January and February, that's not true. In 2020, I was out in January, in February, and I'm glad I was because COVID locked everything down in March, as was my general election opponent, and so were a whole lot of presidential caucus people. On the Democratic side, there were maybe 9 or 10 people who had presidential campaigns who I saw in January out there, cross paths with all the time during those months. So to say, oh, no one campaigns in January and February, not true. People who want a job do, and it shows the work. And so I'm at the point where I'm thinking that there's going to be no perfect time for people who are so dug into appointments to want to vote for elections, and that's fine. You can still believe in elections, but just not in this instance, and want the power of appointment. But I think it's really wrong, and I think it's disenfranchising. And, I'm just going to call it. The mayor said no one knew Miss Jardin was going to resign. No one knew Mr. Delgado was going to resign. Really? Really, they didn't? In hindsight, I look and see that he was giving away a lot of his discretionary at a different time of year than he did. He might have known and participated in that appointment. And I know we're all lauding him right now, but, and so, if no one knew, that's fine. It's just an unfortunate circumstance, but the probability greatly increases with 2 appointees on these tough votes going forward that could impact Ward 3. The probability that these 2 people going forward on split votes between now and the next round of elections, that they are the deciders on citywide issues, regional issues, greatly increases. And so I don't think it's an inconsistent position to say I voted for an appointment before when we had one. This takes us into another special situation where we have a body of voted upon by the public people who can make a very big difference in the hardest issues that we have where we struggle, with our split votes. Thank you.
All right, Vice Mayor Reese.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think the Ward 1 representative makes some interesting points. It's hard, though, for me to accept those points as valid when you haven't participated in this body. I don't know that we've had a conversation in probably more than a year and a half other than passing. It is one of those things that's very sad because ultimately we do have a colleague who has left the body. None of us knew that was coming. The prior colleague, none of us knew that was coming either. But here we are. We find ourselves in a place. And so we're trying to do the best thing we can. And so the concept that this disenfranchises people is incorrect. In a representative democracy, of course, we are elected to represent, and I do represent the entire body, the city of Reno, as the at-large member. And sort of anecdotally that the Ward 1 member was, candidating and knocking on doors in January of a presidential election year is not the same as talking about what happens in a non-presidential off-year election. I mean, we have Michelle Fiore representing 121,000 people in the city of Las Vegas because she received 4,000 votes in an off-year municipal election. That is not representative democracy. Ultimately, the best path here is to make the appointment. I'm certainly open to looking at what charter changes could be made to happen. Our charter committee is a robust group of people who think very deeply about things that are pretty wonky. I mean, they are challenging, and they started that work in April last year. So if the charter committee wants to take a look at it, I think that's worth pursuing. But at the end of the day, this idea that somehow somebody's going to be out there knocking on doors for 5 weeks while other elections are going on is also just bananas. I mean, you knock on a door, and first of all, people are not particularly excited to engage in that way. It's COVID, it's privacy issues. But when you do knock on the door and you say, I'm not on this ballot in November, I'm going to be on a ballot later, it's confusing. It doesn't make a lot of sense. So ultimately, you need to have much longer than 5 weeks to make your case to the voters. I ran in 2016. That was a 9-month election cycle. I ran in 2020, also 9 months. And that's not just knocking on doors. It's also hosting town halls. It's meeting with people via, text and text messaging on Facebook, in coffee houses. And there's a lot more than some 5-week fly by the seat of your pants that results in 13 people running for an office. Again, none of those things are like innovative. We aren't new or trying to find something and being like anti-technology based. It's just reality. I think Ms. Rodriguez has tried her best to say, here's a timeline that I think we could meet. I think she's being very generous with the timeline she's given. When you start thinking about same-day voter registration in the state of Nevada, you talk about how it is to print ballots. You got to go out to vendors months and months and months in advance. And then even then you have people who are denying the integrity of elections and trying to have hand counting of ballots in counties in Nevada. So we know how to run elections in this county. They've been run very well. We're not going to take a flyer on some new trial process for how to be at the cutting edge of some newfangled Ward 1 idea. It's just not going to happen.
All right, Councilwoman Dewar.
Yeah, thank you. In my short time, couple things to cover. So first of all, I agree with you, and I did back when, which is that I believe that there are downsides to ward-only voting, and that those downsides include parochialism, where you get very focused on your ward, which I certainly do myself, and it does, to Ms. Weber's point, eliminate time to do other things. And it also, there's not consequences. When you vote on topics in other wards, there are not consequences whether you vote yes or no
Bingo.
with the voters. It's like a free pass. And it's been challenging for me in my own ward, to live in that system. And the first 4 years I was on here, we all ran citywide, and I had a different experience. And so I've had the two side-by-side experiences, and they've been two very different experiences and outcomes. So I just want to put that out on the record. If we have a charter change that way, I would probably support it. Number two, I had asked this question to Ms. Rodriguez, but we had bad technical problems. So she's here again. I want to ask this question again. Is there a perfect time to have a special election? If it's not while an election's happening, if it's not in the winter, whatever, whoever thinks whatever, is there a best time? What would be a best case?
I think there's two scenarios that allow for it to be more ideal. I don't
Okay.
know, right? Perfect, I think, is a hard phrase for
Okay.
me to give you a
More
timeline.
ideal.
Right? A more ideal time would have been before the NRS deadline that allowed me to no longer make changes to my ballots.
So when is that? Just so
So
we know.
there's different deadlines for the different elections. So it's in NRS. So it was, July 22nd for
Okay.
the general. It's a certain number of days before the election.
Okay.
So there's different deadlines for each of the elections, or just not during an election, right? So we had passed that deadline when Councilwoman Jardin had resigned, and so I could not add that race
Right.
to the general election. So if it would have occurred before then, and you'd had enough time to then bring candidates forward, right, there would have been an opportunity to put that on this ballot.
Well, that's great information, and I think that what I'm going to be hoping for is that we gather together some guidelines for our staff to work on, just like we do any ordinance change, some guidelines on how to do a special election, how to work best with you, what's a timeline, what's a reasonable amount of time to run for office, whether it's a 5-week, maybe it's 5 months, maybe it's 2 months. I really don't know, but we could decide all that later. If you have a date of July 22nd, then we say if the vacancy occurs before July 22nd, we might do it one way, and if it occurs after, we might do it another way. I mean, I would just like to have options so that if we could have an election, we could. And if it could be timed with a general election, I think that would be perfect. And that's why I think myself, the mayor, and others were so excited that the vacancy occurred in what seemed to us to be a very good time. To you, it sounds like it was about the worst possible time.
It was just a little late. It was just this much late.
Okay.
No, would be more than happy to work with your staff. Dates are always hard, but looking at general timelines, because always remember, I always remind my board of this as well. Specific dates, right? NRS can change.
Yeah.
But general timelines ahead of those NRS statutes as to how far in advance of the election we can make changes to the ballot.
Yeah. So whatever we do today, those are just some things, I guess, for Mr. Manager that I'd love to bring back is what's a path forward so we don't find ourselves in this situation where we want to do one thing, but so many things operating against it. Whether practical things, legal things, legislative things, reality things, can we just come up with a process even for our future colleagues? Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to reiterate, honestly, you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. Jamie, want to ask you a quick question. First of all, I think you have done a tremendous job, and Councilman Reese said it eloquently, and quite honestly, you really are a rising star, I think,
let's move on
in
over.
this field. really. So it's impressive. Let me ask you, what is the time frame then? Because from what I'm gathering is, I'm gonna say earliest 6 months, it sounds like, and latest
8 months?
8. That's what I'm thinking, kind of in my head. That this seat would sit vacant.
Oh.
April, 6 to 7.
Because we are in the middle of an election, yes, I think you're probably looking at
7 to 8.
7 to 8 months.
7 to 8 months. Okay, so 7 to 8 months. The other thing I want to be very clear, it's not great also making an appointment. There are a lot of talented people. That's a tough decision. You know, I don't know, I think we had 36 really great candidates that came forward. And then not to mention we were scrutinized for that it was already, you know, it was already sort of prearranged, these kinds of things. These are the kinds of things, the talking points that we see in today's sort of society and election issues that seem to be swirling so, I guess, flippantly. And so I don't love it. I would much rather have the people decide instead of saying, because, you know, that's what everyone loves to call a politician is corrupt. And they always, you know, always say it. So like I said, I want to reiterate, either way, you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. I have a little bit of an issue, and like I said, I didn't really realize the magnitude of it until we went through this last time, when we actually have a council member not showing up for meetings, and that can make it really challenging. I didn't realize that. And then, like I said, then we had another council person that couldn't make it. You know, I don't know what the circumstance was. So here we were as a body, we could not move forward. So that means if I just have one council member out, then it really puts us in a challenging position to continue to do work and really represent the community. So that's kind of where I have the biggest issues, is the time frame. That is a long time. I think Oscar sits on District Board of Health. That's a big deal. What else does Oscar sit on? He sits on, CDBG. CDBG is super important. You know, that helps some of the most marginalized communities. I mean, honestly, like, he sits on some really important boards. So for me, like I said, I absolutely agree with having elections. I do think people should be voted in by the people, for the people, of course, absolutely, 100%. So, but unfortunately, this is a very rare circumstance. All right, I'm going to send it to you, Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move to fill a vacancy in Ward 3 through a appointment process and direct staff to move forward with the timeline as proposed.
All right, I have a motion. Do I have a second? I have a second.
Discussion.
Councilwoman Breckus.
Yeah, I'm not going to support it. I feel like we're here in an episode scripted of Succession, and I just think, you know, the result is that the voters lose out, and the special interests, they weren't here today, they were here before. We had the contractors and the builders, you know, come and talk about fill it. You know, they've all got our ears, whether it's them or the gaming industry, they'll have their ears. And those are the special interests that'll have hold on the next generation of city council members here. And that's who the answer and the talk will go to when the lobbying starts for these appointments. And the voters are out and the applicants are out, because the person who is selected will be someone who is known by the majority of the people who vote for this approval. That it's been that way each time. And in good faith, again, we'll have 25, 30 people put in their names, maybe fewer. And how many will even get a chance to have a phone call with any of you, with an interview? So how many of you are going to allocate, particularly when you're trying to go get the voters to come talk to you, an hour for each of the people who apply and ask to sit with you? Are each of you going to pledge that? I just want to know. I just really want to know.
Well, if
So-
you really want to know.
No, it's rhetorical, actually. It's rhetorical. You know, I think it's good to, if you're going to go with this motion, to lay out a process, what your availability is to people who want to sit in your time, you know, so you can give them due consideration in this critical time for the three of you who are out trying to get votes for yourselves. Or not. I'm not talking to anyone. I'm only looking at this on paper. And people know, okay, council member gets as much review as the HR department when they're looking at, you know, lifeguard applications. Okay. But I won't support the motion. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much.
So, Madam Mayor, just to get it on the record, I want to go through the proposed timeline for the appointment process because we didn't get to that point. So for the appointment process, today is obviously step one, which is choosing and taking the vote to move forward with the appointment process. We will open appointment application acceptance tomorrow, so starting on Friday, September 30th, and we'll accept those until next Thursday, October 6th, in my office between 9 and 4, Monday through Friday. Closing that on the 6th, we will hold the selection of council. That's 1 week, which is the same thing we did last time.
Okay,
We
you
did.
just tell us.
Okay, so we did
Yeah.
5 days, which is consistent with the last several appointment processes that we've done, so 5
Mayor?
business days.
Can we talk about the motion? And I guess maybe that's what we're
Withdraw
talking
the
about.
motion maybe.
I really would like to have, our support and why we're supporting it or not supporting it. I seconded the motion, but before we went to here. I think you're right. Let's move forward with the motion and then we'll send it to you.
Okay.
All right, so I had a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
I just wanted to speak in favor of the motion and why I'm supporting it.
Okay.
And I saw that you raised your hands first, so.
Okay.
You raised your hand
Yes, I raised my
sanitizer.
sanitizer
And then I
bottle.
think we were getting a little off with having Mickey.
Okay, well, maybe a
weigh in.
second
Okay,
piece would
so-
be the process. Okay.
Exactly.
I did
Exactly.
second it.
We're gonna do another motion for.
Well,
process.
I'm going to make a comment then.
Okay.
I want to make it clear, although I am short on time, I thought this was my top priority, even above myself last time. And I reviewed all the applications. I got it down to my top 10 out of 36. And I interviewed all of those people in person. So I'm probably going to go through the same exact process. It depends how many people apply this time. If it's not 36, I may interview fewer. But I don't like that sitting out there that this is some paper review and I'm not meeting the people. I met them, I ranked them, I did my best. The people came and interviewed. One stood out, which was Ms. Turner, and I voted for her, seconded the motion. So that's a process that I followed. And I expect I'll follow it again, even though time is very short. Thank you.
And I too, I would say, I tried to reach out to every single person that reached out to me. I think that is important. And there were people on that list I didn't know at all.
Right, same with me.
I didn't know them at all. So, anyway, go ahead. Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think it's worth sort of just pausing for a moment to think about special interests. Everyone's a special interest. The people who appear in this room are special interest. Each voter in a ward is a special interest. Councilmember Breckus has run multiple elections where she's received hundreds of thousands of dollars from people who have a special interest. So this concept that our decision up here somehow makes us beholden to someone is, again, it's fantastical. It's not real. It's like saying I have an envelope and I will hold it in my desk until I will reveal all. These things are silly. It just detracts from the good work that we're doing. I wish that my colleague would have a higher degree of respect for her colleagues than she has, but that's not something I can change. It just makes me sad because it just tells you that the person who hasn't participated, but in fact has made multiple appointments in their professional career, really has a double standard for themselves. My colleague, Councilmember Dewar, has been always to me a very good guide. Like Councilmember Dewar, I met with everyone who asked to meet with me. I often meet with people from sun up to sundown on Zooms, in coffee shops, on the phone. And so we do the work, right? Some people do not do the work and pretend that they do the work. I can tell you this woman does the work. And I am not going to let anyone sully their name for some, ego smear campaign. It's sad. It's below the dignity of the office, and all of us put in the work, and we'll continue to do so.
Thanks so much. I support this motion, and I do it because of the time frame. We all believe in the right for people to be able to vote on all of these folks. Serving at the county commission level, we had to appoint people. This was not a planned these people were not planning to be gone. And their lives took over, and thank goodness, because they moved on. And so, and the same, I'm looking at the last election, and then this one, and then the election that we did with, not the election, the appointments of these folks. None of us realized that this was gonna happen. And so, the time frame doesn't work for us.
And look,
we
the
need to
timeframe
have this-
stinks, frankly.
We have to have someone in the seat to do the job. And so I believe in this. I support it. I wish it was a different way, but timeframes, and it would be helpful if we had everyone at the seat to make that decision as well.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you so much. All right, so go ahead, Councilwoman Taylor,
Councilwoman Taylor, just in case.
for the record.
Just in case nobody knew. I might be the elephant in the room, but I would say during this process for me, I did reach out to every single council person as well as Ward 5 residents, as well as other people in the community to see if I was somebody that I could work with. Everybody up here took the time to meet with me or call me back or text me or give me some sort of response except for one person, and I appreciate that. So moving forward, I would say I am absolutely available to meet, talk with anybody. And I look forward to doing that. Thank you very much.
All right, so I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Opposed.
Motion carries.
Could we have the clerk?
All right, Madam Clerk,
Go over
back
the
at you. Go over the timeline and the particulars, please.
Okay, so again, today we voted on moving forward with the appointment process. So starting tomorrow, September 30th, which is a Friday, we will open the acceptance of applications. That will run for 5 business days, so it will close next Thursday, October 6th, which will give you 1 week to review all of the applications that have come in and allow you an opportunity when we present this at the October 12th council meeting for you to discuss the applications and narrow down to finalists. It's not on the staff report, but we have designated dates and times in the event you did move forward with an appointment. So we will be doing in-person meet and greets on Tuesday, October 18th at the Northeast Community Center from 5:30 to 7:30, and on Wednesday, October 19th at the Neal Road Rec Center from 5:30 to 7:30. Both of those, in our past experience, we did still hear, we got a lot of great feedback, but we also heard that they needed more opportunity to connect. So we are going to ensure that both of those are hybrid, whereas last time we only did one hybrid and one in-person. So these will both be hybrid. So individuals can access and engage via Zoom if they're not able to make it to either of those locations. Additionally, we will have bilingual services at both of those as well so that we are able to connect with all the constituents in that ward. And then moving forward from that, we would go into the October 26th meeting, which you would do your final interviews of the finalists and make a selection and swear that person in on that date. So again, Friday, September 30th to Thursday, October 6th for candidate applications. October 12th, we'll narrow down to finalists. 18, 19 in-person meet and greets. October 26th are interviews and selection.
Thank you so much. Okay, Vice Mayor, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. I guess I have a couple questions. Number one is shortly after the last appointment process, we had some folks reach out to us about accessibility issues related to the application process. And those were things we were going to, if we had more time between when the appointments happened, we were going to try to address those, in part because the concern was that a person who maybe is working does not have the ability to come to City Hall between a certain number of hours. But to your credit, of course, I think you came in and allowed someone to notarize documents while they were in Elko and helped to make all the things work. So I guess I want to make sure that we're sort of thinking through that. I appreciate the reasons why. It's like in any election, there are certain rules that are followed, and it is important for candidates' sort of finality to know when they are. Is there is there a different way? Is there a more accessible way? What are your thoughts on that?
So we were not expecting as many individuals to be to have issue with the application process. So last time we did accept several applications digitally. We still did require that the applications are notarized. We want to know that the person who is applying is actually the person who is running for that seat. However, we were accepting them virtually. So if somebody is unable or incapable of getting before us between that 9 and 4 hours, they can absolutely email it to cityclerk@reno.gov, and we will accept it and file it for the next business day.
Okay, and it looks like based on your timeline, you're tying it also to our normally scheduled Reno City Council meetings. And I'm not like adamant about this, but it does seem difficult. But I don't know what the other things on the long-term planning calendar are because I haven't looked at it recently. So I don't know if we have time on those agendas to do this process because each one of them has taken a fair amount of time. And so I want to just make sure. And of course, what happens is people come to support their preferred candidates. And it's always a fairly encouraging thing when people stand up and are supportive of your candidacy. So I'm just sort of trying to figure out, because I know we only have a very short window. We have weekends, we have Nevada Day holiday, and so we're trying to do all this under a statutory timeline. So is this the best we can do in terms of the deadlines? I think my colleagues may say, well, I want more than 5 days to be open, or I want, a longer period. Just tell me what your thoughts were when you put together the timeline.
So as each of you are aware, that my office doesn't actually manage the agendas. That's housed in the city manager's office. But we did collaborate. I did collaborate with his staff on the dates and the timelines. So, going through the agenda schedule, looking at the upcoming items that we have planned before us, this really did sit well within that timeline and the upcoming topics that we have coming and scheduled. So even though they do tend to be more robust conversations, much like today, I think they're well suited for this timeline given getting somebody in the seat, allowing the constituents to engage, and then also still giving you the right amount of time to be able to do your interview process.
Question?
Go right ahead, Councilwoman.
Oh.
Can I just ask a question? Is there any way that we can get something up on the monitor so people at home can see what we're talking about these? I don't know if you have something that can be put up there on.
Yeah, give me just a second.
Okay, thanks. Because I'm writing things down and it seems like it would be nice for other folks to see what we're talking about.
May I be called upon just to move this meeting along a little bit?
Hold on one second. Councilwoman Dewar, did you want to weigh
Yeah,
in?
well, I'll wait for the thing. My basic concept was we should start at the day that this person has to be appointed. First, I want to know what day is that? Is that October 31st? That seems like it's about 30 days. Is that the day?
Councilmember Dewar, I don't know exactly what the calendar is, and I don't want to misspeak, but I can tell you that that is how this schedule
Right.
was developed between
Okay.
our group and the clerk's office.
Well-
Is that we started with the last day upon which the appointment must be made, and then
Yeah.
backed into it.
Right, but you also did align the selection with our council meeting, and I'm a little concerned about that because if I recall, we had some pretty lengthy interviews. There was time we had to consider the interviews, rank the people. We had to go away, back. All of that. Let's just call it 5 hours, and I think that should not be on a council day personally, and I think I see the 27th and the 28th as perfectly acceptable days. If we have to appoint by the 31st, which is a Monday, it's just an idea. The other thing is that I thought it's one thing when you have people calling the minute that a council member resigns with interest, but I talked to Ms. Huntsman, and as of 2 or 3 days ago, no one had called her. And what I'm concerned about is that just getting the word out, people are still calling me, did Oscar Delgado resign? They're completely, it just didn't get quite the coverage, and it's very quick. And I guess my thought would be, if you want to open it tomorrow, that's fine, but I would recommend leaving it open, not just 5 days, but like some weekends so that people can think about it, talk about it, call us, meet with us, do whatever they need to do, and maybe have the final date. Are we open on the 10th, Columbus Day, or not? I guess.
We are. Can we
So-
make it bigger?
Maybe, my thought, I'm just doing this off the cuff, but maybe would be to allow them to apply up through the Monday
That's fine.
and then kind of work from there between there, just to allow a tiny bit more time to apply, because I feel, I've heard very few people, no one's called me. There's no names floating out there. No one's called you. I want to make sure we get the time to get the word out and that people know it is time to apply.
Well, and so just for clarification, the last process required special appointments or special meetings because we couldn't align them with council meetings.
Yeah.
Traditionally in the past, these have occurred at regularly scheduled council meetings. So last time was an exception solely for the purpose that we weren't able to align the timing within that 30-day timeframe. The only one for Councilmember Reese, when he did his final appointment, I think was the actual interview and selection appointment, was the only one that happened on an individual date, but everything else happened the same way we have it laid out here, where they were in regularly scheduled meetings, and we were moving forward with our normal meeting platform. So that is really the direction that we tried to proceed in, was what have we done in the past and what seemed to work really well.
And the rationale, if I may,
Yeah,
the
please.
rationale for cutting off Thursday and not leaving Friday
Yeah.
is that we have to post the agenda for the 12th by 9 o'clock in the morning on Friday. And so to include the names for that discussion,
Yeah.
we need to be done with the process by close of business on Thursday so that we have time to prepare that agenda. If that's the direction of the council, of course, we will move heaven and earth to accommodate it, but it will set off a waterfall of special meetings.
Moving back, yeah, it would be two special meetings. One to select our candidates, and I'm thinking of maybe the 14th, which is a Friday. We're having a special meeting today. And one to actually make the interview and do it. So I don't know. Look, it's not a hill to die on. It's just I'm concerned about having enough time for people and also for us. I had to cram in a lot of interviews in a very short amount of time. And I was interviewing people like 3 a day, and it's just challenging.
Councilman Weber? No?
Madam Mayor.
Councilman Breckus?
Yeah, I brought this up before, or in some context. We put a lot of resources into our neighborhood advisory boards. We look to them for advice, information. I know they have a meeting. I just got their agenda today, I think, so they have an upcoming meeting. But they can call special meetings too. I sure wouldn't mind them interviewing, writing down on their comment cards, the pros and cons of each candidate that they see as their neighbors, as neighbors. If we can rely upon them to tell us or the planning commission whether or not a drive-through should open up, or someone should have an extra long driveway or something, why not weigh in on them, who we, look to on neighborhood issues, to tell us who they think should be, up for consideration. Number two is, having gone through this fairly recently, the experience is pretty fresh. A lot of people use the terminology, so-and-so's running for Ward 3, running for Ward 5. They're not running. This is the appointment process. We're doing city business through this. So all communication electronic that creates a public record, electronic, telephonic, is a public record, unlike when someone is engaged in a political process for a campaign. Is that true, Mr. Hall? All communications with these people and others about this issue from members of this body is a public record and we're doing city business and subject to public records?
Well, I think if we're in a meeting, then that's all public record, but if they're out, outside of their office communicating with people, that's not a public
What if
record.
someone texts me on my personal phone and says, I'm applying? I'm running, or vote for Joe.
I don't think that's a public record on your private
That's
phone.
not a public record. Okay, great, thanks. That's interesting. Next question is residency. People were pinging me during the last appointment, and someone who, I did not fact check it, but was a pretty good source, and said that the Friday before the appointment for Miss Taylor, she was registered on Washoe County Registers for from Ward 1. I don't know if that's true. I didn't fact check it. I just conveyed it on to others. Then someone else was raising the issue of they have to have a residency required by a certain number of days before they take the seat. And I think it was 180 days. So I guess the question is how is residency defined? Can someone move in today? Can they move in after the appointment? What is the residency required? I know that as a council member, we have to continue to reside in our ward. That's looking future. I want to know past, and how residency is defined for being able to apply and be eligible for this seat. Do you have an answer on that, Mr. City Attorney?
Let me take a look real quick. I thought it was 30 days before
did
before they submit their application, but
Where is that? Is that in charter?
I think it's in statute.
Okay, because I thought I sent you, I never got a response back. And it was just stuff people were pinging to me and I was passing on, was that it was 180 days.
No.
Is that on the application? Is the residency on the application? And who checks applications?
It was on the application. And you check the applications.
Mr. Hall, you were kind enough to send me NRS 293C.200, which is the residency requirements for candidate requiring the 30 days immediately preceding the date.
Of what?
In this case, it's the closing of filing of declaration of candidacy, which is the form that Ms. Huntsman has filled out.
30 days before you file.
Correct.
Your applicant, so whatever day we close, it'd be 30 days in front of that,
30 days from the end of the application period.
or the day you file.
So in this case, it would be 30 days prior to October 6th.
So no one can move there tomorrow.
So it's not NRS 266.215.
No, it
That-
is. It's city elections under 293C.200 is what
293C.
.200.
.200, so 30 days from what point?
So it says, in addition to any other requirement provided by law, no person may be a candidate for a city office unless for at least 30 days immediately preceding the date of the close of the filing of declaration of candidacy for the offices that person seeks, the person has, in accordance with NRS 281.050, actually, as opposed to constructively, resided in the city or other area prescribed by law to which the office pertains, and, if elected, over which he or she will have jurisdiction or which he or she will represent.
Okay, but they're not a candidate, right?
Well, we're saying that they are a candidate if they put their name in.
For
to be
for an
selected.
appointment? Okay, okay.
And for sake of clarity in the record, Chapter 266 doesn't apply to cities incorporated by charter.
Okay, 266 does not,
266.005, inapplicable to us.
I thought if the charter was silent on the matter, then that does control.
Nope.
So back to the schedule, perhaps. Oh, I'm sorry, she's meeting. We're on pause. I don't know what anybody else thinks. I was just expressing a desire to have a little bit longer time frame, but I don't know what anyone else thinks. Maybe everyone's fine with the schedule that was just laid out.
Madam Mayor, I'll just say for me, it's not perfect, but I think it is workable. So I'm happy to follow the recommendations of the clerk's office. I think, given that you've coordinated with the city manager's office as to how the agendas are run, I will trust that we have the time and bandwidth. I think in the future, again, if this hadn't happened so close in time to the last one, we would fix some of the bugs that we thought happened in the last one about access or length of time. Running them through the NAB. I certainly think that anyone who's a candidate would be wise to go to the Ward 3 NAB next Tuesday in this room, 5:30 p.m. I intend to be there since I'm the at-large member and it's currently a vacant seat. So I think it'll work out. I think I have every faith that good candidates and thoughtful candidates will emerge. And so I'll trust the process that you've laid out. And ultimately, that would be my motion when I.
Okay, thank you. All right, so I have a motion from Councilman Reese. Do I have a second?
I did second it already.
Second?
This is a new motion.
This is a new
yes, second.
motion. Okay.
Yes.
All right, I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those
Opposed?
opposed? Motion carries. Okay,
Thank you. So we are going to move into closing public comment.
okay, thank you so much, Madam Clerk.
All right, Madam Mayor, so we're moving into item C1, which is closing public comment. I have no individuals in the room registered, and I do not see any hands raised in our Zoom meeting. It should be noted for the record that we did receive 2 letters of concern about the process. Both have been submitted to the Reno City Council. They were either general in nature or received after 4 p.m. yesterday, and those will be a part of the permanent record. Just for the record, since I haven't done so yet, I would like to introduce my new Chief Deputy City Clerk. This is Donnie
Welcome.
LeQuee, and he's been helping to run the clock, and he did a great job. So I'm just looking for a motion to
Did you
adjourn.
come from the county? Oh, I love that. Anytime we steal one of the talents over there. Well, welcome. We're excited that you're here.
All right, I'm just looking for a motion to adjourn.
All right, thank you so much. I would like a motion. I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed? Motion carries. I'm still yet to see anyone oppose that motion. All right. Thanks, everyone.